Take on the South has delved into today's topic before when we spoke with Spirit the tattoo artist last year. That conversation was mainly concerned with a poignant and powerful personal story, but we still have much to learn about tattooing in the South. Today we have a guest who will help us begin to further understand how tattooing in this state and the South generally works. What's it like to be an owner of a tattoo studio in South Carolina? What are some of the challenges, legal, cultural, and economic? What is the larger story of those who do tattoos? Who receives them? What is the future of the art and business? To help us explore this fascinating topic and answer these and many more questions is our guest today, Stephanie Melora, owner of Southern Cypress Tattoo Studio in Columbia, South Carolina. Stephanie, welcome to Take on the South.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure entirely. Stephanie, before we get into tattooing and what you do and how it works, can you just tell us a bit about where you're from? Are you local? Are you from somewhere else?
So I was born right here in Columbia, literally at Baptist Hospital.
Oh.
I have lived in the South most of my life, but I did a bit of a stint out west in Utah. So I lived in the desert for a minute. And I remember the first time coming back and just being so overwhelmed by the green that I saw, because I'd been in a desert, everything was brown.
Right.
And I was like, I never want to leave here again. I mean, I do travel a bit,
Sure,
but like
sure.
these are my people, these are my roots. This is where I want to be and where I decided to open up the business. Good. For sure.
Yeah, right. And you came to the University of South Carolina as a student for a while, right? Is that right?
I don't want to think about how many years ago that was. Yes, I attended for about 4 years here.
What did you work with? What was your major?
I was a sculpture major under Professor Robert Lyon, who was absolutely incredible, but I think he's retired now.
So sculpture major, you used your hands, right? You learned to
I
work with
primarily
your hands.
metal, so I did a lot of welding, woodworking as well, and just had a lot of fun during that time of my life.
Well, it's lovely to have you back. Right, Southern Cypress Tattoo Studio. Is there a significance to the name Southern Cypress?
I wanted something that abbreviated to SC Tattoo, because I love the South in general, but South Carolina is my home. And so I was like, Southern Chamomile, or, you know what? But my dog's name is Cypress. So I was like, you know what? Southern Cypress.
Yeah.
And it fit, it flowed. It had SC at the heart, which is what I wanted.
Very good. That's very clever. I like that. There is something kind of just thinking about when you came back from Utah and you saw the green. For me, it was the green and the blue sky and the amazing contrast. I mean, it is a colorful place, isn't it? Vibrant. Also extremely warm.
Yes.
I'm sure warmer than Utah. Well, no, what do they say? It's a desert heat. It's not as hot. I never believed that.
I mean, I actually really enjoy the heat. I don't do snow. I will visit snow, but living in it.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. Well, we're in the right place then, aren't we? How long has Southern Cypress Tattoo Studio been around?
So we opened in 2019.
Okay.
Right before the pandemic hit in October.
Oh, wow, crazy timing.
But I had actually worked in that studio for 8 years prior, and the previous owner wanted to open up a new studio, didn't want to be in the 5 Points location anymore, just wanted a change in her life. And so she was like, do you want it? And I was like, can I think about it? And it took me about 10 minutes, and I was like, I guess I'm opening a business.
And so this is your first business?
This is my first business,
okay.
Yes.
Your timing is, well, a bit awkward, shall we say.
Yes.
So you hang on a minute, you opened it, or rather you took it over, and then how long between you taking it over and COVID?
We started the process of renovations in June.
Okay.
And I couldn't open until October because it was the hoops that you have to jump through. Even reopening a previously existing tattoo studio was just...
Well, that's very... Yeah, that's it. Let me linger on that for a second. So you buy this studio. It is a studio, a tattoo studio, and you become the new owner. What kind of hoops do you have to jump through? These are legal obligations, right?
Yes, the amount of things that you have to, the paperwork that you have to get together. We had to get a letter from the fire chief stating if there was a fire in our facility that they would come put out the fire.
Okay.
Which they have since then taken a lot of those really silly things away from having to get, you know, because I mean, the fire department's 2 blocks away. So of course they're going to respond to a fire. It's also a residential building, but we just had to get this letter.
Like special permission for your fire to be put out, right?
And so it was a little...
Yeah, a bit odd.
Yeah.
But what are some of the technical things that, as a tattoo studio, you had to comply with?
So as far as like sterilization and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I've previously worked at tattoo studios that had steel tubes and had to have the sterile room and like so you can wash everything and autoclave it and make sure everything's sterile. We have actually, because our industry has grown so much, we have switched over to completely disposable. Everything I use gets put in the sharps container afterwards and gets incinerated through the sterilization company, but we don't do any of the sterilization on site anymore, and I feel like that is so much better. And I'm no hate to people who still use steel tubes, but for what I do for my company, I do think it's like the best option.
And it's probably cut down a lot on the bureaucracy of opening up. Okay.
Yes.
So there you are. You acquired in June of 2019. You open in October.
Yes.
And that gives you how many months of operational stability?
We were shut down by March 2020 by the state. We actually ended up shutting down personally a couple days before the regulations came down because we were like not sure what was going on. We had recently had a client who came back home from China, so we were just like, is this like a real thing? Or we'll shut down for a little bit, just get our senses about us. And then they were like, nope, everyone's shutting down for permanent for a minute.
And when did you reopen?
We waited, gosh, I can't remember when the regulations lifted. I think we were closed for 3.5 months.
Okay. Maybe longer than that.
Maybe longer than that. I know that we waited another week after we were technically allowed because wanted to get our new processes in place and make sure all of our clients and our staff were comfortable.
Right.
You know, this meant that you couldn't have any people joining you with your tattoo, so no moral support, because it's one artist, one person at a time. So we just had to figure out what our new process was and get that set up and explain to all the clients and communicate about that.
I mean, that's a long time not to be functioning as a new business. How near were you to going under?
We survived because of our community. I traded hand sanitizer for fruit and stuff, you know, with businesses that were essential but couldn't find hand sanitizer. We had a plethora of, you know, my parents actually also really helped out. She brought my staff Aldi gift cards, just, you know, make sure we have food. Our landlord was like, hey, you guys don't have to pay rent right now. We'll just tack on a few months at the end or however long this ends up being, which a lot of businesses did not have that luxury. We would have absolutely gone under if our landlord wasn't as incredible as she is. So yeah, we made it by the skin of our teeth. But it also didn't feel as bad as opening because there was such a huge gap between opening and I sunk my entire life savings into renovations. And that felt like I was on a sinking ship by myself because, you know, I'm like, when can I open? When can I open? I got to start making money again. At least with the pandemic and all of my other friends' businesses also kind of being shut down, we were all in this boat together and it didn't feel quite so scary because I did see people coming together to help people out.
So it's a really nice illustration of how, as a tattoo artist and business owner, is sort of thoroughly integrated into the community, and COVID, that connection allowed you to endure and prosper through COVID.
And I also think tattoo studios are extremely economically beneficial to small communities like what we have in 5 Points because, you know, now that we're operating as normal again, you know, you're coming to me, you're spending $140 an hour to get tattooed, you're bringing some friends, you know, this is expendable money that you're also bringing to the community, and go have a drink at a local restaurant afterwards to celebrate your tattoo, or go check out the new bookstore that just opened in 5 Points, you know, because you don't want to sit there and watch your friend the whole time get tattooed. That's so it brings business into these small communities.
Okay, so you've invited me to talk about the stuff that I find really fascinating, and I'll have to rein myself in here because I sort of geek out on some of this.
That's fine.
All right. What's your clientele base? Who comes to get a tattoo at your Southern Cypress Tattoo Studio?
It is such a wide range. Okay. I have doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers, baristas who make your coffee. Mm-hmm. It is every type. It's, mechanics. Yeah. A lot of retiring people, actually, people that are very well established in their career, and they're like, you know what, I'm close to retirement. I've always wanted sleeves. Yeah. I'm going to do it.
But for our listeners who don't know what a sleeve is, and I'm sure there's a couple, what is a sleeve?
A sleeve in general is just a large tattoo on the arm or the leg. Okay. So you can have a leg sleeve but it's usually all-encompassing, so you can have a half sleeve, goes down to your elbow. Gotcha. You can have a three-quarter sleeve that goes midway, or you can go all the way to the hand.
So you've got these retirees coming in, so can I have a sleeve, please?
Oh, yeah.
Is that right?
Or full back pieces.
Full back pieces?
Yeah. A lot of times... And
these aren't tiny, right?
No,
these are big.
These are, I think the last leg sleeve I finished up, it took about 3 years.
3 years?
To finish.
Good Lord.
And it was a little bit more. It came up to the waist.
Okay.
So it was very detailed, very large scale. It is every type of person. So
it's ecumenical from every background, and they're choosing usually, I'm sure that some people choose small pieces.
Oh, absolutely. Right? And those are important too. We never want people to... I tend to want to draw larger pieces. Uh-huh. My friends always make fun of me, and they're like, oh, you want Stephanie to do a little tattoo? But small tattoos are just as important as the large ones. And
what's people's motivation usually? Is it kind of sentimental or celebratory, or could it be lots of things?
Usually the first one is fairly sentimental. Okay. Because that's your first big step into that world. Are you going to do this again? Is it too painful? Can I handle this? Mm-hmm. So they want to make sure that it's like, all right, if I went through that pain, it's going to be meaningful.
Sure.
But no, I think the more heavily tattooed you become, the less pieces have to be sentimental.
Yeah.
Some of them are just fun, or, I have a Avatar The Last Airbender tattoo with one of my artists because our shop is obsessed with that, okay. Kids TV show. So they still can be sentimental, but not always.
How many artists do you have in your studio?
Currently 5. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so that's quite a lot.
We do a booth rotation, so we're open 7 days a week right now.
I gotcha. Yeah, so, all right, there's so much I want to ask about this, but I have to rein myself in. You do the art, you're a tattoo artist, not just a business owner. You actually do tattoos yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
And I specialize in cover-ups.
Cover-ups? Mm-hmm. What are those?
So when you say you got a tattoo when you were 18 and you're like, I kind of regret that a little bit. Uh-huh. You would come to me and we would cover it up with a new tattoo, and it's part cover up, part camouflage, part blending out the old and bringing in the new.
So can you tell by the end of the cover up what was there originally?
The goal is that you can't even tell it's a cover up. Huh. That limits you as the client. Like if you were my client, says, hey, I want this script covered up that I got when I was 16. Right. I'm like, okay, well, here are our options. And a lot of times people ask me to do stuff that I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to turn that down because I know it won't make a good cover-up.
Gotcha.
But I can typically work, and if you're willing to go bigger, we have more options.
Gotcha.
But it's a process, and that's why communication and consultations are really important with my clients.
We're going to get into kind of the mechanics of this because I really want a sort of slice of what happens in your studio during a day. You mentioned script. Script is what? A piece of writing or a word?
Yes.
Okay. And these are quite common, right? You see people with script.
Yes.
What's your view on script?
It has to be done at a certain size if you're going to do it.
Okay.
I feel like if you can, me personally, and again, all tattoos are important. Sure. I personally feel like if you can say it with an image, you should say it with an image, because what happens over time is the microparticles of pigment that are attached to your skin cells are doing exactly what your skin cells are doing, which is growing and dividing. So when you have really teeny tiny scripts, that's been kind of popularized on Pinterest and stuff like that, what happens is those little loops in the E and stuff like that, it'll close up over time and become completely unreadable.
It's a bit like being an historian. When you read old script from 200 years ago, it kind of merges and it sort of fades in. It makes it more difficult to decipher, right? Interesting. We've actually had this conversation about the permanency of tattoos, right? So the default is, obviously, it is more permanent than an item of clothing, but you have a certain philosophy on this permanency, don't you?
Yeah, I think, because I have a bit of an academic, or I do have an academic art background, and art history I loved so much, I really was like, wow, everyone's always telling me, like, tattoos are so permanent, I don't know if I could ever do it. Tattoos are the least permanent art form that we have, because when you're gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
So it is only around as long as the human carrying it is here.
And it changes over time as your body changes, right?
Yeah, it sure does. Yep.
Which is probably why, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but I'd always be kind of hesitant to get like a portrait done, just because it would change over time. And or am I wrong about that?
Well, you want to be careful about what part of the body
Gotcha.
that you would get a portrait on. There are areas that don't age near as fast. Now, it also depends on how well you take care of your body. Are you using sunscreen on a regular basis? That's going to be a huge factor on how long the quality and detail of your tattoo is going to last, whether it's a portrait or Japanese or traditional, like sunscreen, sunscreen, sunscreen.
Gotcha. So your studio does a wide range of styles. And you can pretty much do anything that somebody comes in and says, I want this.
No, we're very diligent. So if you came to me and said, hi, I'm interested in getting tattooed at your studio, and we'd be like, great, what are you thinking about doing? And you were to, like, right now I don't have a portrait specialist.
Okay.
And you're like, I want a portrait. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fantastic that you want to work with us, but we actually don't have that person here. Here is who we recommend that you go to. So we'll send clients to other studios if they have the right person for that job.
Would you say the tattoo community in South Carolina and Columbia especially is a tight community? That do other people do that? Is it kind of reciprocity?
We all tend to know each other.
Okay.
I think it's becoming more that way. It has been in years past a little, this is my territory, don't come close to it, and you still find that kind of old school mentality. I personally try to always make sure when an artist reaches out to me and it's like, hey, my door's always open, come talk to me, we can go have a beer, we can go have coffee.
Yeah.
It is changing, I think.
In a way, if you think about locations of tattoo studios in Colombia, it is kind of become more mainstream, right?
Well, finding a location is astronomically hard.
Explain why that's so difficult.
So here in the state of South Carolina, each tattoo regulates their own laws around tattooing. In the state of South Carolina, I cannot legally be within 1,000 feet of a school, a church, a playground, or another tattoo studio.
That limits you, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Significantly. Yeah. And that's, and they only did the 1,000 feet from another tattoo studio recently. And you find tattoo studios kind of all on top of each other because it's so hard to find a space that's not within 1,000 feet of a church.
Sure.
Because we're in the Bible Belt.
We're in South Carolina.
Yeah. So there's there's not just a church on every corner. There's multiple churches on
then you
corners.
add in the schools, the playgrounds.
And yes.
So when do you know when the first studio was put in? Established in 5 Points or that area?
2006.
2006,
I believe, or shortly thereafter.
And it wasn't legal in South Carolina to have a tattoo until when?
Well, I think the law was passed 2005, but it took some time to get the infrastructure around how they were going to regulate tattooing. Okay. So the first tattoo shops didn't open until 2006.
And this is pretty late compared to other states, right?
We were the second to last, I believe, behind Oklahoma.
Okay. Why did it take so long here?
I imagine the fairly conservative culture, I was actually talking to someone yesterday about, back in my day, only, you might see a sailor once in a while who had a tattoo that was a good person, but it was only criminals that had tattoos. But he's like, now everybody has them. Right. He was an older gentleman. Yeah. This is a heavily religious area. Some denominations believe that it is a sin and stuff like that.
So and desecration of the body and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's ironic, though, that Mississippi and Alabama, they were ahead.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. All right. And, then there's also, it could be part of the conservative culture at the time just didn't want to see it. And then I've been told somebody I'm sure can fact check this, but there was a hepatitis C outbreak back in the 70s. Okay. And, you know, there were practices going on in multiple places that made it dangerous and possibly get these diseases from sharing needles and not cleaning your tools properly and all that stuff. So
I know that makes sense to me. All right. I want you to take us into your studio, and let's just say, you know, I mean, presumably you could walk in, but you'd much prefer to have an appointment and a consultation first. Is that right?
Yeah, every once in a while you can get a walk-in, but typically my artists book out, you know, I'm actually getting ready to reopen my books and start taking appointments, but before I closed them down, I was booking 4 to 6 months at a time.
Is that right? 4 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this work is, you know, I mean, if you're going to get a sleeve that took you 3 years to do or something, presumably there's a limit on how much you're willing to do a day.
I never go over 4 hours on a client.
Now, why is that?
Even if you can mentally handle it's painful to get tattooed. Mm-hmm. There comes a point where your body starts to be like, no, you're bleeding too much. Mm-hmm. Which means that the pigment that I'm putting into your skin, some of that's getting pushed back out, which means you're not going to heal very well. There's going to be holidays and gaps in your tattoo. Mm-hmm. I'm also, you know, ADD. My brain doesn't want to focus on a piece for that long.
Well, that is a long time.
Past that amount of time, because I need to be able to reset myself as well.
I mean, Stephanie, 4 hours to do anything is a long time. But, I mean, as I'm thinking about this, I know, you know, you have your philosophy on permanence, but I'm just thinking about the physicality from your end. I mean, obviously the client is hard, but that person's essentially lying there. Here you are, putting on something that, while philosophically may not be permanent, is going to be there for quite a while. No wonder 4 hours is your limit. I don't think I could do many things for 4 hours straight. And given there's a kind of emotional pressure on you, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
Like, you've got to get it right.
Yeah.
Like, this is an unforgiving art form.
Yes. Right? Especially if you're doing something like, say, you know, back to the portrait thing. Yeah. You want a portrait of your grandmother. Mm-hmm. You're going to be very well aware if that does not look like your grandmother.
That's
if
right.
there was a snafu, you know, the artist wasn't quite paying attention. Yeah. So yeah, it is really important to.
A lot of stress. Yeah.
I've been doing this for over 11 years now, so the stress isn't what it used to be. I used to have nightmares about it, and I don't have that level of stress, but, you know, that first line on any tattoo where you're getting to know that particular skin, it's always a little bit like, how's this going to go? Oh, okay. Here, and, you know, you make adjustments
you just used a really interesting phrase there, getting to know that particular skin. Talk to me about that. Is there a specificity to the kind of tactile canvas?
Oh yeah.
Okay, tell me the range. Like just can you describe what that is? Like, oh, I'm dealing with this kind of skin today.
So, you know, especially with some of my a lot of my clientele being older, you have less collagen in your skin. It's a little bit more thin, papery.
Sure.
You know, I never want to insult someone's body. No. It's just the natural part of being aged.
Sure.
And so you have to be significantly more careful in those moments. I'll typically turn my machine down. I've had some skin types that, because of conditions of the skin, like medical conditions, I'd have to adjust my techniques. One of my favorite clients, I call him the narwhal, when we started his sleeve, and he's an older gentleman, you know, I pulled a line and it was just a blowout. There was no avoiding it. There could not be any solid line work in this tattoo, and I was like, hey, we're actually going to change course on this. We're going to ghost line this whole thing, and we're going to color block it. So we ended up doing these 2 big jellyfish that turned into like these crashing waves, and then there was a huge ship on top, and yeah, we ended up, you know, it wasn't quite the original plan, but then realizing how his skin was going to react to the process of tattooing, I was like, this is our only option this way. Yeah. So, and he was like, yep, I'm still in, let's do it.
That's interesting, because I think most people, like myself, would just assume a skin is skin, right? And it's not. It's a very particular feel, and, you know, everybody is
Everyone's
individuated.
slightly different.
That's interesting. Okay, so here we are. Let's just say I called you and I've come in for a consult and I showed you what I want, right? And you say, okay, I like this, but I'm going to suggest this, and here's the positioning. Do you usually suggest the positioning, or is it the client?
The client ultimately has to wear it forever. If I feel like it's a mistake, like this isn't going to work well in this area due to, like, some areas age faster than others. So if you have like a really intricate and you want to go on the smaller side tattoo, you need to place it in an area that's not going to age as fast. Right. So we're not going to be close to the bendy parts of our body.
So that's your wisdom, that's your expertise advising your client.
And ultimately, I do tell people no. I will. Yeah. Usually they will be like, you're the expert. That's fine. And sometimes people want to fight you on it. And I'm like, okay, I understand. There might be an artist out there that will do it for you, but it's not me because my name is attached to it.
There you go.
So,
it's your art too.
You know, I also have rules about I don't do people's names on you unless you're blood or deceased from that person's life. Like, you can't come and be like, I want my girlfriend's name, and I'm be like, no, buddy, that's not going to happen.
There's a kind of interesting reciprocity here between the client and the artist, right? So you kind of have to negotiate at a certain level to agree on what is best. Yeah,
and what's realistic.
And realistic, and because it's your art too. I mean, it's your piece. All right, so just bear with my imaginary for just a moment.
Okay.
So I'm coming in. And Stephanie, this is the first time you've done a tattoo, let's just say that, right? And I'm a bit nervous, and you're a bit nervous. How does that work when you're doing your first one?
Well, you wouldn't be the one getting tattooed if you were nervous.
Probably not.
You would never, for my apprentice, you would never come into my shop, say, hey, I want a tattoo. And I'd be like, great, it's her first time, go sit with her. That should never happen. Okay. Not saying it hasn't, but it should never happen.
All right.
But it certainly has never happened in my studio. I can say that.
Let's say I'm very confident then. I come in, I'm good with this.
You would have to be heavily tattooed.
Oh, really?
You'd have to
Could not be my first one from a novice. If it's the artist's first tattoo, it's not going to be my first tattoo.
And those are my rules.
Okay.
I have a lot of rules around how my apprenticeships go. You know, it cannot be, it's probably going to be someone that I picked out for them to tattoo that I know has already garbage tattoos.
Right, okay. The canvas is already a bit muddied, right?
It's just a fact, and there's no shortage of people who don't mind having an apprentice tattoo because it's free.
Yeah, it's free.
It's free. They're learning.
When does it stop becoming free? Like, how many do you have to do before you can start charging?
I think each apprentice would be different. Okay. My apprentice, progressed fairly quickly, and then it would be like, okay, you need to start charging $75 per session. They're also very slow. So you charge less when you're a young artist because you're taking up a significant amount more time. Gotcha. For me, sometimes I book myself for a tattoo for 3 hours, and I'm like, that only took me an hour and a half because I forget how fast I am because I've just been doing it so long.
Right.
But my apprentice wouldn't have that, that hand memory and stuff like that built in yet. So,
do you remember the first one you ever did?
I do. It's actually the stencil of it is in my booth along with my first dollar.
Is that right?
Yep.
How interesting.
It was a tribal elephant on a foot.
Were you a bit nervous when you the first one, or not?
I do remember I had another dream. I'm a vivid dreamer, and I had a dream that I started tattooing and the skin turned like all black, and I was like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Right. So yes, nervous, but my mentor, the guy who taught me, I had been drawing his tattoos for a long time, and I had drawn so the guy that I did, he requested to be my first because I had already drawn so many that my mentor had done on him. And he was like, whatever your first one is. And he's the one that put together the little frame with my first dollar, and it said, good luck inking, and put the stencil in there as well. So I was nervous, but he was such a great, we had, at this point, we had a friendship because he'd come by the studio all the time. And then I did a few others after that I, learned some lessons on that were all still free, but I'll run into them sometime. They're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, I actually thought in my head I did way worse than that actually is. So
there you go. And there's probably a certain pride, once you become a well-known artist like yourself, you're like, well, I was the first one. Yeah. That's very good. It's like the original, right? It's the original Warhol or something. All right, so there we are. Now, I don't know, I've chosen some tattoo that's going to take, I don't know, 3 hours within your 4-hour window. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, there's a certain pain, because I had one, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be, and I just had, sipped on Coke, so my blood sugar was...
Keep that blood sugar up.
Keep it up. But isn't there a certain physical labor for the artist here, right? It can be quite taxing, can't it?
Yes, my chiropractor makes good money.
Right.
Especially when you're, looking down all day and you
Sure.
finally stand up and you're like, oh
Sure.
dear, and crack your back and stuff like that. But muscle fatigue, because you have to stretch the skin as well.
Gotcha.
So depending on what part of the body it is, if it needs more stretch or less stretch, I try to have my clients actually kind of help me out a good bit. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, we're going to be in gym class. Put your arm across your chest and pull. So you go. And we'll take breaks and stuff. They're not going to have to hold that for 4 hours or anything like that. Right. Like, all right, your hand's probably going to fall asleep. Let me know when you need to move around. So
yeah, I'm kind of interested in the physicality of it, because people always just think, oh, it's the pain of the tattoo, but there's way more that goes into this, like your pain, the kind of stretching that you need.
I personally, after I get tattooed, I'm a curvy person, and my hips hurt so bad from, if I'm getting my side tattooed and I'm laying on my hips on this not hard table, but certainly not a soft table.
Sure.
And your body the next day is just kind of stiff and a little out of whack. So the physicality afterwards as well for the client can also be, fairly taxing.
Talk to me about your fingers, the hand that does the art.
Both hands, actually.
Both hands, yeah, because you're doing that, you're stretching and then...
Different tasks, but same goal.
Yeah. You left or right-handed?
I am right-handed.
Okay. So the tattoo gun itself...
We call them machines.
Machines, sorry, thank you. Right, can you tell me about that and how it's changed over time?
Oh, wow. In the past decade, maybe a little bit longer, maybe the past 15 years. Sometimes I forget how long I've been tattooing. Everything's revolutionized. Tattoos have become so much more acceptable in culture that money has been invested into research and development of all the equipment we use. So I'm a very rare case. I started out on rotaries.
Rotary, okay.
And then I switched to coils kind of a couple years into my career when I got some other mentorship from other artists.
So there's two types. One's a rotary and one's a coil.
Yes. So coil is the one that you associate that kind of stereotypical tattoo noise with, that buzzing sound. Mm-hmm. You're going to get that sound out of your traditional coil machines. Okay. And a lot of artists still use them. I have artists in my shop that still use them, and they're great and love them. They can really be tuned and nuanced to do very specific things. There are also a lot of maintenance as well. Okay. So I actually use rotaries and cartridges.
So a different sound.
It's almost silent.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, you can hear it a little bit, but, I've had people go, something's missing. And then they'll be like 30 minutes into the tattoo, and they're like, oh, your machine's not making a noise, but it's still still functioning. So
rotary is the more modern iteration, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you prefer the rotary? I
do personally.
Okay.
I can use either or, but the rotary machine that I just got is, I love her so much.
Expensive things?
Astronomically, if you're buying good ones. So you can buy cheap ones on Amazon for $50, but
how much is a good professional rotary?
The last setup that I bought cost me, I think, $1,300.
Good Lord. Yeah, that's up there, isn't it? Wow, interesting. So technological advances, I'm in there, you've done it for 3 hours, I'm delighted. Talk to me about what happens after the tattoo has been done.
I'm going to lecture you about aftercare.
Okay, good.
I want you to know how to take care of the very expensive piece of art that you just bought.
Yeah.
I'm going to speak it all to you, but I'm also going to send you home with a paper copy because, your endorphins and your chemicals are going. And
a bit muddled, yeah.
Yeah, so you're probably going to forget half the things that I told you.
Right.
But yes, we're going to do that, and then we're going to finish up our paperwork payment, and send it home to heal.
And do you check in occasionally?
Check in? On how the tattoo's healing? Absolutely. Usually, if there is something that they're like, I'm not so sure about this, they'll reach out to us first. Okay. But we have a lot of repeat clientele. Yesterday I was in the shop and Shane's like, you want to see this dream catcher I did 6 years ago? And, you're like, oh man, that's held up so good. It still looks great.
But it's very satisfying to see it hold up, right? Mm-hmm. So Stephanie, by way of kind of a long conclusion here, can you tell us about the future of the business in South Carolina? Would you see it growing? Do you see it kind of flattening out? I mean, what does it look like?
I can tell you my hopes and my dreams.
Well, that's
I can't predict the future, though.
Good enough. Hopes and dreams.
My hopes and dreams are not that we reduce the standards that we require our tattoo shops to have. I do think there is an excess burden by all of the 1,000-foot rules, which makes tattoo artists have to compete with each other on ridiculous levels to get spots that are the right spot. Yeah. I would love to see, even just like a bar only has to be 500 feet. Can we get a 500 feet rule instead? So
hang on, a bar has a 500-foot rule, and a tattoo studio is 1,000 foot. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. And they would also never put a 1,000-foot rule. Well, I never say never, but you have bars right next to each other. Right. We have a whole bar district. Right. You would never be like, oh, nope, you have to be 1,000 feet from CJ's or Delaney's or whatever.
Right. There would be no vista.
Correct. Right. Yes. These small districts would not thrive as well as they do. So I think in general, the tattoo world is just going to keep growing and learning. We've already boomed so much in the past 2 decades. I think it's going to keep growing astronomically. There's going to be more people getting tattooed. I would love to see the regulations lifted on neck and face tattoos, because that's also illegal here in South Carolina.
So for people who don't know, what's the highest mark that you can go on the body here?
C3 collarbone, or C3 vertebrae and your collarbone. Okay. That's about where you can't go up from there without supervision of a doctor.
Really?
You can get your eyebrows tattooed, but those estheticians are supervised by doctors, and I can't afford to have a doctor on staff.
And do a lot of people come in wanting tattoos beyond the neck?
Oh, we get that question every week.
Do you really?
Multiple times a week at least. Yep. Had to answer that question multiple times yesterday.
Sure. While I was is it legal in other states to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
As far as I'm aware, South Carolina is the only one that it's illegal. Now, it's not illegal for you to have your neck tattooed.
Right. It's illegal.
It is illegal for me to do the procedure.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay, so it's looking up, right?
I hope so.
Good. All right.
I think it's looking up in general for sure, but I think South Carolina, we got a little bit of still work to do, but we're getting there, and the tattoo community's coming together more and more to make sure that we have high standards and that our clients are well served. Well, this has been enlightening, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day as a business owner. I know that there is a cost to this kind of thing. Stephanie Melora, thank you for being on Take on the South. Thanks for having me.